she was called soulless, a word heavy with scorn and fear, whispered behind her back and shouted in moments of rage. In a village where spirit and soul were everything, where the presence of one's essence was seen in the way the wind shifted, the crops grew and the fire flickered, she was a ghost without a place. From the moment she was born, people avoided her, crossing themselves or muttering prayers as she passed. Mothers hushed their children, warning them not to look too long at the girl with hollow eyes and an air of cold silence that clung to her like a second skin. Her name was Amina, though few ever used it aloud. It was easier to call her soulless, a label that cut through the air like a blade, wounding deeper than any physical scar. Amina knew what the villagers believed. They said she had no spirit, no light inside her, that she walked among them as a shadow of a person. At school, the children threw stones at her, calling her names until tears blurred her vision, but she did not cry out. She endured the cruelty with quiet resilience, retreating into herself where no one could reach. Her only companion was the cold wind that blew through the barren fields at the village edge, whispering secrets and carrying the scent of distant places. When the sun set and the village settled into uneasy silence, she would wander to the riverbank, tracing patterns in the mud with her fingers, feeling a strange pull beneath the surface that no one else noticed. It was as if the earth itself held a secret about her, something deeper than flesh and bone. The elders refused to acknowledge her existence, or when they did, they spoke of her with a mixture of fear and disgust. Some believed she was cursed, a child born without a soul to carry the hopes and prayers of the community. Others whispered of dark magic, a punishment for some unknown sin committed by her ancestors. But Amina carried no hatred. Instead, she bore the weight of isolation with a quiet dignity, her eyes reflecting 1,000 silent stories. In the village square, the priest would glare at her with suspicion, his lips moving in silent prayers whenever she passed. His presence was a constant reminder that she was an outcast, watched and judged by a force she could neither see nor touch. Yet despite the coldness surrounding her, there was something mysterious about Amina, a spark beneath the surface, barely visible but fiercely alive. One night, as the moon rose high and silver over the village, she stood alone beneath the ancient baobab tree. The villagers kept their distance, crossing themselves and whispering prayers. But Amina lifted her face to the sky, feeling the moonlight wash over her like a balm. In that quiet moment, she sensed a power within her, something ancient and unbroken. The wind shifted, and for the first time, the villagers noticed the flicker of something different in her eyes, not soullessness but a fierce, unyielding light. Though the village called her soulless, Amina's spirit was far from gone. Beneath the silence and the scorn, a fire burned, one that no judgment, no cruelty could extinguish. Her journey was just beginning, and though the world around her refused to see her for who she truly was, she would prove that soul was not something given or taken, but something forged in the depths of silence and strength. The village priest was a man of imposing presence and rigid belief, a figure whose voice carried weight far beyond the small stone chapel perched on the hill. His name was Father Equim, and to the villagers he was both a spiritual leader and a keeper of ancient laws that bound their lives. With his long flowing robes and eyes sharp as a hawk's, he embodied the authority of the gods and the church. But beneath his holy veneer was a heart hardened by fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of anything that challenged his power, and most of all, fear of the girl they called soulless. Father Equim's condemnation of Amina began quietly, whispered in sermons and prayers, but it soon erupted into a public spectacle that poisoned the village air. His sermons grew darker, filled with warnings about evil spirits, curses, and the danger of harboring those who defied the natural order. He spoke of Amina without naming her, describing a soulless shadow that haunted the village's peace, a vessel for dark forces that threatened to unravel their way of life. Each Sunday, as the villagers gathered in the chapel, Father Equim's words cut deep. He preached about purity, about cleansing the community from corruption, and about the sacred duty to protect their souls from contamination. His voice rose and fell with passion, echoing off the stone walls, stirring fear and suspicion. Mothers clutched their children tighter, elders nodded grimly, and even the youth lowered their eyes in shame. The priest's fear-mongering was not just spiritual but deeply political. He knew that controlling the narrative about Amina was a way to maintain his grip on the village's hearts and minds. By casting her as a vessel of evil, he united the people in a common enemy and distracted them from questioning his authority. His sermons were laced with veiled threats and calls to action, urging the villagers to watch closely for signs of darkness and to report any contact with the soulless girl. Father Equim's hatred for Amina was personal as well. To him, her silent defiance was a challenge, a rejection of the order he sought to impose. He saw in her eyes a dangerous spark, one that could inspire others to question the old ways. He feared that if she was allowed to walk freely, her influence might grow, undermining the control he so carefully cultivated. During a particularly tense gathering in the village square, Father Equim took the stage to speak directly to the people. His voice thundered over the crowd as he declared Amina a threat not only to their faith but to their very souls. He accused her of witchcraft, of consorting with dark spirits, and of bringing a curse upon their land. His words ignited a wave of fear and anger that swept through the villagers like wildfire. Some villagers, fueled by the priest's fervor, began to act on their suspicions. They avoided Amina, barred her from the market, and whispered curses behind closed doors. Even the children, once indifferent, now threw stones and shouted insults. The village became a place of suspicion and division, where Amina's every move was watched and judged. Yet amidst the growing hatred, the priest's words also revealed the cracks in his armor. In quiet moments, he wrestled with doubt and fear of the power he could not control. The more he tried to suppress the girl's spirit, the more it seemed to rise, a quiet rebellion against the darkness he preached. Father Equim's relentless campaign against Amina was not just about faith, it was a desperate attempt to hold on to a world that was slipping away. In his eyes, condemning the girl was a way to protect the village, but in truth, it only deepened the wounds and set the stage for a reckoning that neither he nor the villagers could have imagined. As the village grew darker with suspicion and fear, Amina stood at the center of it all, a silent figure marked by hatred but unbroken, her spirit a beacon in the shadows cast by the priest's accusations. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the village to its core, challenging the power of faith and the strength of a girl labeled soulless. The evening air hung heavy with tension as the village gathered once more in the shadowed square beneath the ancient baobab tree. Flickering torches cast uneasy shadows across the faces of the crowd, their eyes flickering between the girl they called soulless and Father Equim, the man who had condemned her with his harsh words and unyielding faith. The priest stood tall, his robes rustling as he raised his hands to silence the murmurs, preparing once again to speak of her as a vessel of darkness, a threat to the community's salvation. Amina stood silently, her figure small but unwavering in the center of the circle. Despite the cold that seemed to seep from the priest's words, she held herself with a quiet strength, her eyes reflecting a calm that unsettled many. The air was thick with anticipation, a collective breath held tight as the moment approached when Father Equim would once more speak her name with venom. But something unexpected rippled through the crowd, an invisible force that shifted the balance of power in an instant. As the priest opened his mouth to curse her again, a sudden chill swept through the square. The villagers gasped, their breath visible in the unnaturally cold air. Father Equim's lips began to quiver, then stiffen as if seized by an unseen frost. His voice, which moments before had thundered with authority, faltered and vanished, trapped in an icy grip that silenced him utterly. Panic spread through the crowd. Whispers erupted, some fearful, others filled with awe. Mothers pulled their children closer, and men exchanged wary glances, unsure whether what they witnessed was miracle or curse. The priest's face grew pale, beads of sweat forming on his brow even as a frost seemed to cling to his skin. His mouth remained frozen, lips sealed tight as if the very breath had been stolen from him. Amina's expression did not change. She watched calmly as the man who had sought to condemn her was rendered mute by a force none could explain. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackling of the torches and the shuffling of uncertain feet. The villagers, once confident in their priest's power, now faced a tangible proof of the girl's otherworldly strength, a power born not from dark magic, but from something deeper and more ancient. Some whispered that the moon itself had intervened, that the breath which froze the priest was a blessing from the ancestors, a mark of divine justice. Others feared it as a sign of doom, that the girl's spirit was no longer bound by human laws but was touched by forces beyond their understanding. Father Equim's eyes darted wildly, searching for a way to break free from the invisible frost. He opened his mouth again, desperate to speak, to reclaim his voice, but only silence came forth. His hands trembled as he reached toward his throat, his body betraying the control he once wielded with such certainty. The crowd's mood shifted. Where once there had been condemnation, now grew a mixture of fear, reverence, and confusion. The girl they had scorned was no longer just a target of suspicion. She had become a living enigma, a symbol of power that could not be ignored. As the night deepened, the villagers slowly dispersed, carrying with them the weight of what they had witnessed. Tales of the frozen breath would ripple through the region, growing in legend and fueling both fear and hope. Amina remained, standing beneath the ancient baobab, her breath calm and steady, a quiet testament to a spirit that would not be silenced. This moment marked a turning point, not just for Amina but for the entire village. The priest's frozen mouth was a warning that the old ways were being challenged, that fear and hatred could no longer hold sway over a power that was as mysterious as it was undeniable. From that night onward, the whispers of soulless began to change, edged now with awe and uncertainty. The girl who had been cast out was slowly becoming something far greater, a force to be reckoned with, a breath of cold truth in the warmth of tradition, and a harbinger of a new dawn where the boundaries between fear and faith blurred into something altogether new. The morning after the night when Father Equim's breath froze, the village was not the same. As dawn's first light crept over the dusty rooftops and the towering baobab tree, a heavy hush settled over the settlement like a thick fog. The whispers began almost immediately, soft, cautious, yet growing louder with each passing hour. In the marketplace, where villagers usually greeted one another with warmth and chatter, conversations now hung in the air like uneasy shadows. Mothers whispered behind cupped hands as their children clutched their skirts, and old men sat in tight circles, speaking in hushed tones, eyes darting toward the girl they once scorned. Amina's name was no longer just spoken with contempt. It was spoken with fear, curiosity, and something almost like reverence. "Did you hear?" The priest's breath froze when he spoke to her last night. One woman murmured to another as they gathered near the well. The other nodded, her face pale. "Some say she is cursed. Others say she is blessed. But no one knows which for sure." In the narrow alleyways, children who had once dared to tease Amina now kept their distance, unsure whether to fear or admire her. The village was divided, half still clinging to the priest's old teachings and warnings, the other half beginning to question what they had believed for so long. At the center of this turmoil were the elders, those who had always held authority through tradition and faith. Some called for renewed prayers and purification rituals, insisting that the girl was a dark omen who must be cast out to protect the village. Others, quietly but resolutely, argued for caution, saying that the strange event was a sign that the old ways needed to be reconsidered. "There is a balance we have forgotten," whispered one elder, her voice low and trembling. "The spirits are speaking to us through her. We cannot ignore what happened." The local healer, a woman known for her wisdom and connection to the earth, also found herself torn. She treated Amina's wounds with gentle hands and offered her herbs for strength, but she too was wary of the whispers spreading like wildfire. Some villagers accused her of consorting with dark forces simply because she did not condemn the girl outright. Meanwhile, the cousin who had once jealously watched Amina's peaceful strength now kept to himself, his nights plagued by restless sleep and unsettling dreams. He feared the girl's growing power and the shifting tides of belief that threatened his standing in the village. Rumors multiplied as people shared their own versions of the story, each more exaggerated than the last. Some claimed the moon itself had wept tears of silver for Amina, while others said the frozen breath was a curse that would bring ruin to all who had wronged her. The village's once tight-knit fabric began to fray under the weight of suspicion and fear. Neighbors who had shared meals now avoided each other's gazes. Trust was scarce, and the silence between words was often filled with unspoken dread. Yet, amid the growing tension there were moments of unexpected kindness. A few brave souls brought food to Amina's humble hut, leaving gifts of wildflowers and soft cloths on her doorstep. They saw in her not a threat, but a survivor, someone touched by forces beyond their understanding but still deeply human. By nightfall, the village was a place transformed, no longer merely a community bound by routine and tradition, but a battleground of faith and doubt. The whispers of soulless no longer carried just scorn. They carried the weight of mystery and the flicker of hope that perhaps, in Amina, something extraordinary had begun. As the moon rose high and cast its silver glow over the thatched roofs, the villagers watched and waited, uncertain of what the future held but keenly aware that nothing would ever be the same again. The night deepened, wrapping the village in a cloak of silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Inside her modest hut, Amina sat alone, the flickering light of a small oil lamp casting shadows on her worn face. The village might see her as soulless as a witch or a curse, but deep within her chest beat a secret she had guarded fiercely since childhood, a power woven through her very breath and soul, a gift misunderstood by those around her. From the earliest days she could remember, Amina's breath was different. It carried a chill, a coldness that could still a flame or freeze a drop of water in midair if she willed it. But it was more than just cold air, it was a tangible force, a subtle energy that pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat. This power was tied to the soul, not a hollow emptiness, but a reservoir of strength and connection to something greater than the village's narrow beliefs. Her mother had once whispered to her in secret before the sickness took her away, "You carry the breath of our ancestors, Amina. It is the spirit of the moon and the night winds, a gift to protect and to heal. But it must be kept hidden, for fear will twist its meaning." Amina had lived those words in silence. She learned to control her breath, to temper its chill when around others, lest they recoil or whisper cruel things behind her back. Still, the power surged in moments of fear or passion, revealing glimpses of the ancient spirit that breathed within her. Tonight, as the village lay restless with rumors and fear, Amina closed her eyes and let her breath deepen. She could feel the pulse of life in the air, the invisible threads that connected her to the earth and sky. With each exhale, the cold spread out like a gentle wave, not harsh or biting but soothing and steady, a reminder that her power was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. The breath held memories too. She could sense the stories of her ancestors, women and men who had walked paths both dark and light, who had wielded their gifts to protect their people and guide lost souls. Their voices whispered to her in dreams and quiet moments, urging her to trust the strength she carried. But the village, with its narrow minds and fear of what it did not understand, had branded her a soulless child, a vessel of evil rather than a bearer of light. They could not see the invisible threads of protection woven through her breath, nor the quiet warmth beneath the chill. In the flickering lamplight, Amina touched the pendant that hung around her neck, a small carved stone given by her mother, inscribed with symbols of the moon and wind. It was a talisman, a focus for her power and her hope. She had never dared to speak of it, but now she felt its energy hum softly, a pulse in harmony with her own. Her breath, cold as the moonlit night, was a shield. It could freeze pain, soothe wounds, and hold darkness at bay. But it was also a key, a connection to the ancient forces that shaped the world, waiting to be unlocked and understood. Amina's eyes opened, bright and steady in the dark. She knew that the fear of the village was not the end, but a beginning. Her gift was misunderstood, yes, but it was real and powerful, a legacy she would claim. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets of the night. The breath of the girl they called soulless was a breath of life, ancient and unyielding, ready to rise beyond the fear and judgment of men. And as the moon traced its silver path across the sky, Amina smiled faintly. The power within her was awakening, and with it came a promise, that she would no longer be silenced, no longer be broken. Her breath would tell the truth and the village would one day learn to listen. The priest's mind churned with restless thoughts, each one darker and more frantic than the last. Father Kamau had always been a man of conviction, certain that his role was to guard the village against evil and maintain order under the watchful eyes of the gods. But ever since the unsettling incident with Amina, the girl branded as soulless and whose breath had frozen his very mouth, his confidence had begun to unravel like fragile threads in a storm. What had once been a steady flame of faith now flickered with shadows of doubt and paranoia. The villagers whispered behind closed doors, some still wary, others secretly curious, but Father Kamau saw only one threat, Amina. To him, she was no ordinary girl. She was a dark force, an embodiment of all that could unravel the delicate fabric of their community. And so his thoughts spiraled into obsession, a relentless pursuit to control or destroy what he no longer understood. Every sermon became a weapon sharpened by fear. He spoke of demons disguised as innocence, of souls stolen by unseen forces, and the need for vigilance and purity. His voice echoed through the village church, stirring both fear and fervor in the hearts of the people. Yet, beneath the surface of his fiery words lay a growing desperation, a knowledge that his spiritual authority was being challenged in a way he had never faced before. At night, when the village slept, Father Kamau would pace the cold stone floors of his quarters, clutching a worn leather-bound book filled with ancient prayers and rituals. He pored over texts that spoke of possession, curses, and purification rites, searching for any means to sever the invisible thread that connected Amina to her mysterious power. He had tried to confront her directly, but each encounter left him more unsettled, her calm gaze and quiet strength mocking his attempts to break her spirit. His paranoia deepened with every passing day. The church elders, once supportive, began to question his increasingly erratic behavior, but he dismissed their concerns. To him, their hesitation was weakness, a failure to see the darkness creeping into their midst. He believed that if the girl's power was left unchecked, it would spread like wildfire, consuming the village from within. Father Kamau began to see shadows in every corner, whispers in the wind, eyes watching from the trees, and unnatural chills in the night air. He convinced himself that Amina was not acting alone, that she was a harbinger of a greater evil, perhaps summoned by forces beyond their understanding. His prayers turned from hope to command, demanding protection from the gods and justice against the girl who defied his authority. Driven by his obsession, the priest sought allies among the villagers who shared his fears. He gathered a small group of loyal followers, men and women willing to act on his behalf to root out the supposed darkness. Together they plotted ways to isolate Amina, cutting off her access to the village well, spreading rumors to turn neighbors against her, and watching her every move under the cover of night. Yet, with each attempt to tighten his grip, Father Kamau felt the ground shift beneath him. His control slipped like sand through trembling fingers. The girl remained steadfast, her presence unsettling but unyielding. The more he fought, the more he realized that fear alone would not extinguish the power she carried. Haunted by his failure and consumed by his growing paranoia, Father Kamau faced a choice: continue down a path of destruction fueled by fear, or confront the unknown with humility and courage. But pride and desperation clouded his judgment, and so the priest's dark obsession deepened, setting the stage for a confrontation that would forever change the fate of the village and the girl they feared most. Amina stood quietly at the edge of the village square, the cold evening air swirling around her like a cloak. Her breath, once a source of fear and suspicion, now felt like a quiet flame burning inside her, a power she was learning to wield, not hide. The villagers had begun to murmur about her in hushed tones, some with curiosity, others with lingering fear. But tonight, Amina was determined to change the story. Tonight she would reveal the truth. The priest's words had poisoned the minds of many, painting her as soulless and dangerous, but beneath his sermons lay hidden fears and unspoken secrets, things that Amina had come to understand in her own way. Her breath, the very thing that had frozen the priest's mouth, could do more than intimidate. It could reveal what was hidden, exposing lies that had long festered in the shadows of the village. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, feeling the silver light of the moon weave through her lungs, mingling with her breath. When she exhaled, a soft mist floated from her lips, not ordinary fog, but a glowing vapor that shimmered with an eerie, translucent light. It drifted across the square, curling around the faces of the villagers and seeping into the cracks of their stories. First it touched the priest. The crowd gasped as the mist wrapped around him like a silken veil, and then, as if pulled by some invisible thread, the veil lifted, revealing the truth hidden beneath his sermons. The priest's voice faltered, and an ancient lie emerged in whispers, echoing through the square. Years ago he had manipulated sacred rites for his own gain, silencing those who dared question him. His righteous mask cracked, exposing the greed and fear that had driven his zealotry. The villagers recoiled in shock, their eyes shifting between the priest and Amina. For so long, they had accepted his word without question, but now the mist revealed his flaws, his deception, and the lies that had sown division among them. Amina's breath moved on, swirling toward the elders who had once shunned her. The mist revealed the truth behind their coldness: jealousy and fear of the unknown, the desire to maintain power by keeping others in darkness. Secrets of hidden alliances and betrayals surfaced, the quiet fractures in the village's foundation laid bare by the silver light. One by one the mist touched faces: the blacksmith who had stolen goods in his workshop, the healer who hoarded remedies to maintain control, the merchant who whispered slanders to keep rivals at bay. The breath revealed all, the whispered truths and the darker lies that had thrived in silence. As the revelation spread, the crowd's fear began to shift, replaced by disbelief, anger, and finally, a grudging understanding. The girl they had feared was not soulless, she was a bearer of truth, a living mirror reflecting their hidden selves. Even the priest, silenced and exposed, could no longer deny the power of her breath, not just the frost that had shocked him, but the light that now illuminated the darkness he had tried to hide. His authority crumbled as the villagers turned to Amina, their eyes no longer filled with suspicion but with the dawning of respect. Amina remained calm, her breath steady and sure. She did not gloat or wield her power with cruelty. Instead she offered the village a chance to heal, to confront their mistakes, and to rebuild with honesty. The breath that once froze the priest's mouth had become a voice for justice, unmasking the shadows that had kept the village divided. In that moment, beneath the watchful moon, the village began to change. Whispers of fear were replaced by conversations of truth, and the girl once called soulless was finally seen for what she truly was: a guardian of the soul, a beacon of light in the darkness. The moon smiled down upon her, its silver rays embracing the girl whose breath had freed them all. Amina had always sensed there was something more beneath the surface of who she was. something ancient and powerful, though hidden even from herself. The whispers in the village called her soulless, but those who spoke the words didn't understand the truth. Her soul was bound not to the ordinary world but to a lineage older than the village itself. Her breath, the freezing mist, the power to reveal hidden truths, all were gifts passed down through generations of guardians sworn to protect their people from darkness, even when misunderstood and feared. One quiet evening, as the silver moon cast soft light over the earth, Amina found herself drawn to the old forest on the village's edge, a place whispered to hold the spirits of her ancestors. Guided by an unseen force, she stepped beneath the ancient trees, the air thick with the scent of earth and history. The forest seemed alive with a quiet energy as if waiting for her arrival. At the heart of the woods, Amina discovered a circle of weathered stones, carved long ago with symbols that pulsed faintly beneath her touch. Closing her eyes, she felt a surge of memories, not her own, but those of the women and men who came before her. These ancestors were fierce protectors, entrusted with guarding sacred knowledge and defending their people from threats both physical and spiritual. Their power flowed through bloodlines, and Amina was their latest bearer. Her breath, cold and revealing, was not a curse but a sign of her connection to these ancient protectors. The village's misunderstanding of her was rooted in fear of this old power, a force they could not see or control. The label soulless was a lie born from ignorance, a way to distance themselves from the mystery that they neither understood nor welcomed. The ancestral voices spoke softly in the wind, guiding her to embrace her heritage rather than hide it. She learned that her breath could purify, reveal truth, and protect from darkness. This power was meant to be a shield, but when wielded by one so young and alone, it had only sown fear. Amina felt a deep pride swelling inside her, pride in her bloodline, her strength, and her role as a guardian. The curse others saw was actually a blessing waiting to be fully awakened. With every breath she took, she connected more deeply to the roots of her family, and with that connection came clarity, purpose, and hope. She would no longer let the word soulless define her. Instead, she would live as the last spark of a proud lineage, a beacon of protection, truth, and resilience for her village and beyond. The tension in the village square was palpable as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the gathered crowd. Whispers swirled like restless winds, anticipation, fear, and disbelief intermingling in the heavy air. At the center stood Amina, the girl branded soulless, her breath steady despite the storm brewing around her. Opposite her was the priest, his face pale but rigid with the desperate grip of authority and rage. His eyes flickered with a mixture of fear and fury, the same fear that had grown in him since the day Amina's breath froze his mouth. The villagers held their breath as the two faced one another, the weight of years of suspicion and pain hanging thick between them. The priest's voice cracked first, trembling yet loud enough to cut through the murmurs. "You stand accused of blasphemy, witchcraft, and corruption of our sacred faith. Your very presence is a threat to our people. Confess your sins or be cast out forever." Amina's eyes, calm and steady, met his with an intensity that held the power of the ancestors behind them. She did not flinch, nor did she raise her voice in anger. Instead, her breath came slowly, a quiet mist swirling at her lips. "I have no sins except those you have feared without cause," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of truth. "The power you call a curse is the legacy of my blood, a gift meant to protect, not to harm." The priest's face twisted in disbelief, his hands trembling as he clutched his robes. "Lies. You deceive the people with your dark magic. You threaten the order that keeps us safe." With a slow, deliberate breath, Amina stepped forward, and the cold mist flowed from her lips like a silent wind over the parched earth. The villagers recoiled as the temperature dropped, frost forming on the stones beneath their feet. The priest's eyes widened in terror as his own breath began to freeze once more, the same chilling force he had once tried to condemn. But this time Amina did not stop there. She raised her hand and the mist gathered, revealing images in the air, secrets long buried in the village's history. Faces of those who had been wronged by the priest's harsh judgments, evidence of corruption hidden beneath his holy mask. The crowd gasped, murmurs turning to cries of shock and anger. "You claim to protect us," Amina's voice echoed, "yet you wield fear and lies to control. The true darkness is not in me but in those who blind themselves with hatred." The priest staggered, his authority unraveling like fragile threads. Desperation overtook him and he lunged forward, but Amina's calm breath wove a shield of frost, stopping him in his tracks. The villagers, now awakened to the truth, surrounded him, their faces no longer filled with fear but with a fierce demand for justice. In that charged moment, the village's old power shifted. The girl once called soulless stood as a symbol of truth, resilience, and justice. A living testament that fear could be overcome and that true strength came from embracing one's heritage rather than hiding it. The priest's reign ended that night, not with violence, but with the quiet, undeniable power of a breath that froze lies and revealed truth. The village would never forget the moment when the frozen breath of the soulless girl melted away the shadows that had bound them for so long. The village lay nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, a place where tradition was sacred and the old ways still held sway. For years, Amina had walked its dusty paths like a shadow, quiet, misunderstood, and burdened with the weight of a name that meant nothing but scorn, soulless. Yet beneath that name and the whispered fears of the villagers was a truth far deeper and more powerful than anyone had imagined. Now, standing at the crossroads of her past and her future, Amina was ready to embrace the destiny that had always been hers. It was the dawn after the final confrontation with the priest, a confrontation that had shattered the village's blind obedience to fear and deceit. The air still held a crisp chill, and the first rays of sunlight scattered like silver threads through the trees. Amina stood at the edge of the village, looking out over the fields where golden crops swayed gently in the breeze. Her breath, once a mark of suspicion and dread, now shimmered softly in the morning light, a visible sign of her connection to the ancestral power coursing through her veins. No longer the girl who hid in the shadows, she had become a symbol, a living bridge between the old mysteries and a new hope for her people. The villagers watched her differently now. Children who once avoided her gaze, now approached with curious eyes, their faces open and eager. Elders who had whispered curses now nodded with cautious respect. Even the once hostile neighbors found themselves drawn to her presence, sensing something ancient and protective in the calm strength she radiated. Amina did not seek their approval. It came naturally as she walked the delicate line between the seen and unseen, the mortal world and the realm of spirits. Her transformation was not sudden. It had grown slowly like the steady turning of the seasons. After the priest's fall from grace, the village elders gathered in the ancient meeting hall to reconsider their beliefs and fears. They spoke of balance, how darkness and light coexisted, and how the gift in Amina was part of a lineage meant to safeguard the village from harm. Stories surfaced of ancestors with similar powers, women and men who had walked between worlds to protect their people from unseen dangers. Amina listened to these tales with a quiet smile, feeling the weight of generations settle into her bones. She was not cursed or soulless, she was chosen. Her days became filled with new rituals, not of fear but of honor. She learned to control her breath, using it to heal wounds, calm storms, and purify the water from the nearby river. The villagers brought their sick and troubled to her, and she offered comfort with a steady hand and the gentle power that once terrified them. Where there had been suspicion, now there was gratitude. Yet the path was not without struggle. Some voices in the village still clung to old fears, whispering that her power could one day turn dark. Amina welcomed their doubts, knowing that true acceptance required patience and understanding. She met their fear not with anger but with openness, inviting dialogue and sharing the history of her bloodline, how her ancestors had protected the land through centuries of hardship. In the evenings she would walk beneath the moon's silver gaze, the same moon that had watched over her through lonely nights. She felt its gentle light seep into her soul, strengthening her resolve and connecting her to the vast web of life around her. The moon was her guide, a constant reminder that even in darkness, light persisted. One night, as she stood on a hill overlooking the village, the moonlight revealed a circle of glowing flowers blooming at her feet, an ancient sign of favor from the spirits. Amina knelt and touched the petals, feeling a surge of warmth and purpose. The message was clear. Her destiny was not just to survive but to lead, to inspire, and to heal. News of her gifts spread beyond the village, drawing travelers from distant lands who sought her wisdom and healing. She welcomed them all with humility, sharing stories and learning from theirs. Her influence grew quietly, like roots spreading beneath the earth, unseen but vital. Through it all, Amina never forgot the loneliness of her past, nor the sharp sting of being called soulless. Those memories fueled her compassion for others who felt outcast or broken. She began training a small circle of apprentices, young people who had been misunderstood or rejected, teaching them to find their own strength in the face of adversity. Together, they formed a community of resilience, bound not by fear but by shared hope. Seasons turned to years and the village transformed. The old walls of suspicion crumbled, replaced by a spirit of openness and reverence for the mysteries that shaped their lives. Festivals honoring the moon and the ancestors were revived, with Amina at the heart of the celebrations. her glowing scar a badge of honor rather than shame. One evening, as the full moon rose high and cast its silver fire across the land, Amina stood before the village in the ancient circle of stones. Her voice carried across the quiet night as she spoke of balance, courage, and the power of embracing one's true self. The villagers listened, their faces illuminated by the moonlight and the flickering flames of the fires around them. In that moment, the girl who had once been called soulless was no longer defined by fear or misunderstanding. She had become a living legend, a healer, a protector, and a beacon of hope. Her breath, once a source of dread, was now a symbol of life and renewal. The moon, ever watchful, shone brighter than ever, as if celebrating the dawn of a new era. And beneath its gentle light, Amina embraced her destiny fully, no longer a girl of shadows, but a woman of radiant strength and enduring mystery. The girl had walked a long and winding path, marked by shadows of fear and whispers of doubt. For years the village had called her soulless, a curse wrapped in silence and isolation. But the moment had come when she could no longer run from what she was. Beneath the vast expanse of sky, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, she stood tall, ready to embrace the truth that had always lived within her. At first, the villagers did not know what to make of this change. The girl who had once hidden in corners, eyes downcast, now moved with a quiet confidence that stirred the air around her. Her breath, once feared as a cold curse, was now a gentle wind that soothed aching wounds and calmed restless hearts. Where there had been suspicion, there was now a hesitant curiosity. Her scar, faint but glowing softly in the moonlight, became a symbol, not of shame but of survival and power. Children who once feared her began to ask questions, and elders nodded with newfound respect. They saw that the girl's strength was not born of magic alone but of courage, endurance, and a deep connection to something far greater than themselves. With this change, the girl found herself at the center of a slow, steady transformation in the village. Old fears began to dissolve, replaced by stories told around fires about the ancient protectors of the land, ancestors who had wielded powers like hers to guard their people from harm. She was no longer an outcast but a living link to that sacred past. The girl took on a new role, one that balanced mystery and guidance. She became a healer for those who were broken in body and spirit, a protector for those who felt vulnerable, and a quiet force that reminded the village of the deep magic woven into their world. Her presence was a reassurance, a promise that even in the darkest times, light could be found. But embracing her destiny was not without challenges. Some villagers clung to old prejudices, their eyes shadowed by fear. To them, the girl's power was a reminder of things they could not understand or control. She met their doubts with patience, never forcing her truth but standing firm in who she was. Her strength grew from this quiet resilience, a flame that burned steady despite the wind. At night, she would walk alone beneath the moon's silver light, feeling its cool glow fill her with calm and purpose. The moon had been her companion through loneliness and pain, and now it was her guide toward a future she was ready to shape. Its light seemed to bless her every step, connecting her to the earth, the stars, and the endless cycle of life. Word of the girl's transformation spread beyond the village, reaching travelers and seekers from distant places. They came with questions, with hopes, and sometimes with fear. Yet each who met her left changed, carrying a piece of her calm strength back to their own homes. The girl's legend grew quietly, like the roots of a tree stretching deep beneath the ground. Within the village, she gathered a circle of those who had once been outcasts, those who understood what it meant to be misunderstood. Together, they formed a community of resilience and hope, learning to embrace their own gifts and the power of unity. The girl's role as a leader was subtle but undeniable, her voice a steady anchor in the ever-changing tides of life. Festivals were revived in her honor, celebrations of the moon and the ancestors, of healing and renewal. The village came alive with color and song, a testament to the power of acceptance and transformation. And through it all, the girl stood at the heart, her breath a soft wind that carried the promise of a new dawn. In embracing her destiny, the girl had not only changed herself but had awakened her entire village. The chains of fear and superstition were broken, replaced by a deep respect for the mysteries that shaped their lives. She had become a symbol, not just of power but of hope, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of those who dare to be themselves. As the moon rose high on a clear night, casting its silver fire across the land, the girl looked up and smiled. Her journey had been long, but it was only just beginning. With the moon as her witness and the village behind her, she stepped forward into the future, strong, radiant, and free.